Hi everybody and welcome to this fifth part of the crash course on ZBrush. In this case we're going to be working on how to use the Z-Modeler. The Z-Modeler is an option that the program put in a few years ago and it allows us to model in a much more traditional way. It's really similar to what we would have in a traditional 3D program like Mesh or 3D Max. This option allows us to make hard surfaces and allows us to make a more controllable modeling process. Okay, we'll make a cube to start with. Here, with Subtool, we'll insert a cube. Okay, eliminate the sphere with Delete, and we'll be left with the cube. Okay. Activate the mesh, and we'll see that it has this topology. We have to start the cube in another way. Go down to Start, and here we can control the number of cuts we want on the cube. For example, 2, 2, and 2. Each side will have these cuts. We hit Q cube, and automatically we'll get this cube with the instructions we put into the panel. In this case, to start with, we would start with 1, 1, and 1. Q cube, and we get the cube shape, also with different polygroups. As you know, those polygroups can be used to paint in other colors, make selections in other parts, and other things. To understand all of this, we'll color the piece with one of the polygroups. To do this, we'll go to Polygroups and click on the visible group. Now I have the cube colored in one polygroup. Now to start working with the Z-Modeler, we have to choose the right brush. The brush is this thing here. If we go into the brush panel, you'll see it here. Although it's a brush, it doesn't really work like one, because we can't stretch nor sculpt on the model. What we'll do is actually closer to how we would work with a traditional 3D program. And if we right-click here on the polygon, we get this panel. The panel shows us what we're going to do, where we're going to do it, and how we're going to do it. And we click on each of the elements, on the polygons, the edges, or on the vertices, and we'll get a different panel. We don't get this panel on the polygon, just to clarify what we're going to do, where we're going to do it, and how we're going to do it. In this case, from the edge, we get this other panel, these other panels, and from this point we get these panels. As you already know, in a traditional 3D program, the modeling is done much more through the points, the edges, and the faces. Here we're going to do the same thing. If I go right-click from the polygon and use Q-Mesh, we'll make an extrusion. Q-Mesh is what we'll use the most in Z-Modeler to make an extrusion, and it's true that here we have the extrusion tool, but we'll use the Q-Mesh more in this case. Now we'll indicate where we want to make this extrusion. In this case, we only want to do it on this polygon. So we'll indicate that we want to make an extrusion on this polygon. We click here, we'll also make an extrusion, and we'll make a new polygroup. Now we have the mouse button held and we hold the Alt key as well, you'll see that we can change the color of the polygroup. It's perfect to make different color polygroups and things like that. We'll leave this one on this color. Okay, now I'll do the rest, keeping the Control key held. You can see that I'm separating the face from the rest of the cube. Okay, and now here we can make another extrusion. We make some extrusions like this. Another option that we have apart from these two that I've shown you is to stretch this without adding any cuts or extrusions. We do this with the Shift key. make the extrusion without any cuts. We'll lose the cut that we had. Okay? Okay. This is on the topic of extrusions. Well, now, if I mark where I want to make this extrusion on this polygon, I'm going to mark it, instead of this polygon, I'm going to mark the whole polygroup, all of the polygroup. Seeing as this cube is just one polygroup, we'll make the extrusion on all of its faces. Hitting this key, we set the polygroup like this, see? Like this. See, we can paint it. And this one as well. And we can make a selection of polygons. And now I can show you that I want to do what I want to do with QMesh, just one polygon. So this program will interpret that this selection is just one polygon, so we'll make an extrusion on this area alone. As you can see, there's an infinity of things we can ask the ZBrush to make an extrusion where we want it to. We have the polyloop option that indicates that we want to select all of the other sides of the object that we have. We also have the option make a selection of all the triangles. That said, if this cube had any 3-point polygons or triangles, we could indicate it so it would only make the extrusion on those kind of triangles, you know, or 3-point polygons. As you can see, there are a ton of options. We can also indicate that we want to extrude it as an island. This tells us that we'll make an extrusion of a polygroup inside another polygroup. The polygroup inside of the other one creates an island. In this case, to make this simple introduction exercise, I don't want to go too much into this. We'll make a kind of simple gun. We'll get this cube. We're going to move it. Activate move. And now we can stretch it from this point, holding the shift key. And we'll make a kind of extrusion, or we'll elongate it from the cube. We'll do this way. We'll put it on this view, activate it with a click on the gizmo, and we'll make it a little bit thinner. Okay, now we'll make a cut. The cuts are made in the following way. Hitting right click on the edge and marking insert. This way we can click and put the cut in wherever we want to place it. Alright, you already know that if I place this cube, I can subdivide it in Subtool. So I go to Subtool, Geometry, and we'll activate the dynamic. So we'll see a kind of preview of the object on level 3 of the subdivision. If I activate it now, we'll see a kind of cube on level 3 of the subdivision. It's a kind of preview. As this model doesn't have cuts, when we subdivide it, it'll become a sphere, pretty much. Now here, we can start adding cuts. For example, let's put a cut here, here below, and look that when you add a cut here below, we're marking this area much more. Just so you can see, I'm going to take away the dynamic and I'm going to put in a cut on each corner. For example, a cut here, another cut here, another one here, and another one down here. With this now, if you activate the dynamic, look at how the shape is now much harder. So the number of cuts will imply how hard the surface is going to be. Now that this is clear, we have to work it to see how it really works. So we'll go back and start on the model. I'm going to make a cut more or less here. Now with this part, with the Alt key, I'm going to make a selection of this face. Now, right click, QMesh, and put in a single poly. And we make it the extrusion. Okay. Now we can grab the points and move them at the same time. For this, we can see that the symmetry is activated now. So activate it. We don't have it well placed, so we're going to go to transform and activate the symmetry. Symmetry on the x-axis. Now we have to grab the points. So right click, and instead of split, we'll hit move. Now we simply have to grab the points and we move them like this. Okay, now we can add in a cut here, around here, to indicate that we want a kind of curve, but not too pronounced, like this, more or less. If we go to dynamics, we can see how the model is turning out. Look at how it's still a little bit too organic. We're missing some cuts. Now we can make a selection and simply make an extrusion to just the polygon. Remember to click on single poly, and we're only doing it on one polygon. We can paint with the Alt key. With Control, we can separate the polygon. And with Shift, look at how we can make this kind of like beveled extrusion. Yeah, so we'll leave it like this. Here I'll make a different cut. So this one will be different. Right click, and instead of marking a single edge loop, we'll use a multiple edge loop. With this, we can make a symmetrical cut. Or, if we move the mouse at the same time, we can create multiple cuts. Also, each cut conserves a polygroup. In this case, we just need this. We can extrude this area and leave it like this. Now, we'll do this. We'll make a selection here, another one here. As we work in symmetry, it works for us, and we extrude, and with Shift, we can make the extrusions. Okay, perfect. Now, we can go to Insert again and mark a single edge loop. And then these cuts, one here and another one down here. As you can see, we can just go along making the cuts and actively activate the dynamics to see how it looks. You know, just looking at how our thing looks. Look. And we still need some cuts here. Remember that also with the dynamic activator, we can still work. We just need to make another cut here. The closer it is to the edge, the harder the surface is going to be. Okay, get rid of the dynamic, and we can see where we're missing cuts. We need one here, and another one here. Okay, and look how little by little we're going along hardening all the surface. Okay. We can also activate the Polygroups mesh to see how it looks. It's fundamental to work with polygroups to see the colors that they get and later apply those kind of cuts where we need to, in order to keep the organic shape, or not if we don't want to. For example, here we have this curve because we didn't put in any cuts. If I put in some cuts here and another here, we can see that the surface gets harder. As we're not interested in this case, we'll go back. Well, later, as you can see, there are some different options. Here, apart from the Q mesh, we can also use the bevel on the polygon or eliminate it. If we click here, we eliminate the polygon. We also have the options like insert, transpose, split, so there's a bunch of options. The ones we're going to use the most will most likely be the Q mesh and the poly mesh. The last option lets us paint the polygroups with different colors. To do this, we can also go to the Polygroups panel and choose between all of these options. There are options to paint these polygroups automatically, and there are other more specific ones coming from the normal ones. For example, coming from the normal ones, look at that how now with ZBrush we painted a different gun with different polygroups coming from the normal ones. As this area now is another polygroup, I can tell ZBrush that I want to extrude this area. Q mesh and all polygroup. This way we just extrude the area. Also, with the insert, we can make interior extrusions. Taking out the dynamics, you'll be able to see it properly. You can also select the faces to make a bevel. You see, like that. Polygroups option is very useful. As I said before, it allows us to paint the different polygroups of each element. With polygroup and the option a single poly, we can paint each polygon in a polygroup. To choose the color of the polygroup, for example, to paint this part in yellow, first let's select the brush, obviously from ZModeler, and later with the Shift key held, we can apply the brush from ZModeler. The smooth brush won't be associated anymore with the Shift key, but now we can select the colors. Remember, first to select the ZBrush, later with the Shift key held, we can choose the brush again. Now, holding Shift, click on the polygon, put in the color, and now we'll go to the orange part and click, and look how we're painting the same color from before. Now, with Control Shift out, we can select the polygons through colors. As you can see. The polygroups, as I've said, are to choose different parts and to work with them independently. Okay, that's what they're for. Okay, the gun, we're going to see how we have it. And, well, we could leave this part here, but we'll make some more modifications to this. So, with the key to make a selection on these polygons, we're going to extrude them with Q mesh. Like that. Let's make a cut here. Insert. One really close, you know, a really close one, and another that's not so close so that we can keep the curve. And we cut here. Okay. And now we need another cut here. Here at the end. And another one here. Here at the end. Okay. Dynamics. And we'll see how this element looks. To make the holes, there are different ways to do this. So we can insert a cube. Okay, we could just do that. Start it like we did before. Hit 1, 1, and 1. And V. You activate the mesh. Here we go. We can do this on the other element. As I said, we can put it in a cube and we can make a hole like this. With the insert, first select the single poly. Select these two polygons. and make an interior extrusion. And now, with QMesh, we're going to mark this polygroup. Make the extrusion until we can see the other element. I'm going to cut it a second, like that. And as you can see, I go back, make the extrusion like this. And then we make the hole. That's one option of doing this element. So I'm going to go back to the sphere. I'll go back to look at the gun. I'm going to eliminate this. Now we're going to make another hole. We'll make a cut with insert. And we're going to make the hole another way. First we'll take out the dynamic. Okay. Marking the point, right click, we'll go to split. And that way we'll make, as you can see, a kind of extrusion in a circle that we can later, with QMesh and Polygroup out, make an extrusion. As it's the same color, we'll make an extrusion down here as well. So we'll make a manual selection with Alt, and now we'll extrude. And if you look, we have this element painted as well. We're going to hit dynamic, and we'll see how the shape looks. Okay. Let's go back. All right. There's another option to make the cuts. That's done with multiple edge loops, where we can make like multiple cuts. We can use this to create some detail. For example, here, right click, QMesh, Polygroup L, and we make the extrusion. Obviously, we're getting the same thing. We're getting a polygroup in the same color. So I can go back, make another cut, and with the Alt key, I'm going to be painting the different polygroups. Like this. Now here, with QMesh and Polygroup out, I can make this extrusion. We can make more details, for example. Here we could make this selection and make a kind of extrusion or bevel, for example, a bevel. And here we can make another extrusion. Okay. As you can see, it's just a question of working it out and trying them out to see the use of each of them. And so we can also see where we're going to use each of them, okay? This is just a small introduction. I don't want to mess your head up too much because it's a bit difficult to understand at the beginning. So, you know, maybe practice with like a gun or something. All right, that could help you a little bit. We'll leave this like this. We're going to see how it looks with the dynamic. We have quite a few surfaces that we have to like cut a little bit, just so we can see it a bit better. So we would simply add a cut here. Insert a single edge loop. And we can put one here and another one here. Another one here. And this way, just, you know, create more detail. So obviously the more cuts we add in, as you know, the harder the surfaces are going to look. Here, for example, if we add in some cuts, these parts are going to be much more defined. Okay? We'll hit dynamic and we can see the shape our model is taking. Later, obviously, we can use any element And this is completely modifiable. We can stretch, we can modify any point. Anyway, you could do whatever you want. So we could get this element and transform it into a Dynamesh and continue working with it. Okay, we'll leave it here for now because at the end we're going to work with ZModeler a little bit more. But I hope you've seen a little bit more of how it's used and, you know, you've learned a little bit. I hope you've enjoyed this. We'll leave this here and I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Bye!